Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Sledgehammers in the Office podcast, where we celebrate the heavy hitters on the job site and in the office. Today, we have a very special guest returning to the podcast, someone who's been helping me the last couple of years just get everything going in the business, someone that has given me a lot of advice, Mr. Kevin Finley.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So, from our last episode and the conversations we've had together, wanted to see if I could roll through an intro of you and you can fill in any of the gaps real quick.
Sure.
So you had Always Welding, which started in the 90s. You were welding all kinds of things from pipe in warehouses to the clover leafs that are on the freeways, all the on-ramps, not the on-ramps, off-ramps, but the transitions on the freeways. Ended up kind of transitioning your focus into what you're doing right now with signature gates and welding systems. You guys service automatic gates, you install, service, and build automatic gates for communities throughout Arizona.
Yep.
And then when you have downtime, which is very limited, you like to be fishing, spending time with your wife, and then on Sundays we'll find you at church.
Yep, that's me. And I work on these.
Yeah.
More doing these than fishing lately. So I don't like not being at home.
Yeah.
So
Nice.
so I this is kind of a hobby that I can work on cars and rebuild motors and different things, and I can be at home. So
It's a good way to do it.
yeah.
All right, so we wanted to structure our conversation in two parts today. The first is we've had 2 years to essentially have conversations about business as I've got mine started, made the jump from being an employee to now working for myself, and different things that you've had along the way for that. And then the second part is more specifically with what you're doing, and then if it's some kind of more advanced business stuff with what you guys are dealing with rather than what someone who's more starting out is dealing with. So one of the things that we talked about right off the jump and is why we even changed our name from Sledgehammers in the Office to Cyto Building was with naming a company. So you had a story with that, and I wanted you to kind of walk through a little bit, but also probably the thought process behind how you look at naming a company, because so many people get all in their head about it.
Sure. I remember originally we had named a company, me and a buddy of mine, that we ran some welding stuff back in the early 90s before I started my company. And we named a company Accents in Iron is what we named it. And we put an ad in the Yellow Pages, which was very expensive back then. And we got no business, so we had to pay for all this stuff and whatnot. So what we learned was, we quickly learned that a name can be too confusing, and you need to simplify, and it just needs to sound professional. And it's not, there's a lot of choices with a professional name, a simple professional name. And all of those choices will work as long as you market yourself properly. But a name that is too complicated will hurt your business. You have a lot of options that will be good for your business, but if you choose the wrong name, it can hurt your business because it's just confusing for people. And so I've always remembered that. And so so we went from that to Affordable Welding, and put a different ad in emphasizing not the name, but the services that we do. And boom, welding came alive. And so just the name and how you emphasize what you do makes a big difference.
So how did you look at that with, we'll say, the name that we had, and then also anyone else? Do you have any rule of thumb where it's like, hey, here's how I'd name a company if someone's starting?
Yeah, I think if you just keep in mind some of the larger companies in the state of Arizona, say, or the larger companies nationwide, and you see, Sunt Corporation, you see, these large companies that are, it's a very simple name. It's in many of these are just a last name of a person. Finley Corp, right? That's my last name. I could name something Finley Corp. That's a good name. That's a good name because it's not going to hurt you. It sounds professional, sounds big, sounds reputable, and so that's kind of what you need to do. Having little quaint names doesn't normally work unless you're in a very limited market. You're looking for a limited small niche, that type of thing. Like when I originally started my company, I called it Always Welding, right? Even though that is kind of quaint and nichey, and I wouldn't do that today if I were to do it. It worked for me at the time because I was aiming small in the beginning. I was like, well, I want people to know that I'm always welding on things, right? So it kind of worked or whatever. But I also quickly realized that needed to change. So even that name for a niche would work for only a small market. But you really want to shoot for the sky, and you need to keep your name professional and simple.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you mentioned that you guys were doing advertising in the 90s. A lot of people today are very familiar with Facebook ads and all that, but what did that look like in terms of the amount of spend that you guys had, the return on investment that you guys had, and what even were those advertisements?
Well, back then, the advertising was a monopoly by Dex Quest, by Dex back then. And it was extremely expensive. So today's market, it's way better to be starting a business and advertise. Back then, if you wanted to start a business, you had to go to Dex or you're out of business. And Dex back then, just think this, a little tiny ad that almost nobody's gonna see in the yellow pages was close to $5,000 a month. Now you got to remember what minimum wage was back in the middle of the 1990s.
It's like 15 grand today.
Yeah, I mean or more. So my house payment back then was $717, if that tells you, So and then I had to sign the deal on a $5,000 ad. It was unreal. So on good months, you would make the ad back plus some, and then on bad months you might lose a little. I mean, it was really rough, but you didn't have any choice, and they played hardball too, So today you have so many different options that you can use. You can use different guys that are good with marketing, get on Google and maximize your searches, and then Facebook, and you've got Instagram, and I mean all these different things that you can power your stuff with today. And so it's a real good thing. There's big advantages in starting a business today compared to back then.
Yeah. As you started to grow, how did you start to pick up employees? What was your thought process behind that besides, I'm just busy?
Yeah, so really a rule of thumb. And everything that I do, sorry, I get choked up with my coffee in the morning. Everything that I do, I try to, I'm probably, and I'm not saying the way I do it is the only way to do it, but I'm I try to keep things simple, right? I try to have rules of thumb is what I try to do. And in my view, I was like, once I get to a point where I can't do all the work myself, and I feel like I'm passing up on jobs in order to just do other jobs, then it's time to hire an employee. And at the time, and this was 20 years ago, 25 years ago, whatever, at the time, I said, I gotta have 10 grand in the bank before I can hire an employee. I gotta have just 10 grand just sitting there in case work gets slow so I can pay this guy for a few months, without and whatever. And I was pretty confident that if I had 10 grand, I could keep that employee, because I also don't want to do a disservice to employees and tell them, unless there's a deal cut ahead of time where, hey, I might be able to use you, I might not be able to, I'm not gonna give you full time. Man, that's good. Sometimes a guy's unemployed, he'll take that, and he's like, yeah, I like that. But most of the time, I want to have a relatively good assurance that I can pay him, regularly without laying him off. So it was 10 grand back then. Today, I would say you need to have 25 per employee, I would say. For me, that would be a rule of thumb. 25K sitting aside, that's one employee. 25K sitting aside, now I can have two, that type of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then as you've grown the team, you've mentioned to me a couple of things, but how do you guys try and retain the people that you have, and also almost build that culture of the guys that you do have to make sure that they feel appreciated a part of the company and a part of the team?
Well, I think you just have to be honest with them, and that's what I try to do. I try to tell them, look, and I just tell them straight up, look, I don't know if God wants you here long term, which we have retirement and stuff, and we'll get into that on how to retain your employees, but or if you're just here for a while. You might just be here for a season, the Lord has some other plan for you or whatever. So I always tell my employees, look, I'm not, if you are going to quit and go elsewhere or whatever, I'm not butthurt over that. I understand I don't have control over their lives, and I don't want control over their lives. If they're going to come here and they're going to work, and we're going to get a good product out of them, they're going to get a good payment package out of me, then hey, let's rub each other's backs for 5 years or whatever it might be. And so I have a good employee right now who's probably moving into a municipal job that he's wanted his whole life, and and he's going to take off for a few weeks next month in order to go do some training with them, and I'm going to give him an extra week of pay so he can go do that. Like, I'm here to help, whatever. So that's number one, and I think once you establish that with them, then they understand that they're not, you're not against them. It's not some kind of battle between them or whatever. You say, look, I'd love for you to stay here, but if the Lord has a different idea, then fine, that's okay, that's all right. We'll just be honest about it. So, and then secondly, yeah, you've got to pay guys good. I think even more than pay, you need to provide the opportunity for guys to have some health insurance, to have a retirement. Like, if you want guys to stick around long term, and I'm not saying a lot of guys are going to do that. Out of 20 employees, maybe you got 5, right? 3, 4, something like that. But if you want people to stick around long term, you got to give them a long term plan. So you say, hey, look, let's start an IRA where you put in 3%, I can match that or whatever, and then they can start saving on their own. You're adding a little bit of money. And then by the time, if they're starting with you at 18, 19, by the time they hit 60 years old, they got a truckload of money. They got a lot of money, I mean, they can go retire. So if you offer that, you can get some long-term, you get long-term retention of good employees, And obviously, you have the ones that you'd rather not stick around. They don't do enough to get fired, but they don't, but they're not doing enough for you to, really want to retain them or whatever. So, and there's those guys too, and you try to make that as infrequent as possible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the things you told me was you guys have occasional dinners where you don't just have the team there, but you also have the family there as well. And
we do that. We're doing that this coming Wednesday. We have our Christmas one. We did one a few months ago. We go to Pizza and Wings. Company picks up the tab. We tell them, look, bring the kids, bring the wife, or the husband, bring grandma. That's what I always say. I always say bring grandma. And so sometimes they do. They bring grandma, or whatever. So you just want to, because sometimes you've got to be tough, and there's no question about that. You have to say, hey, look, we don't want to do this. We got to do A, B, and C. But you also want to know it's not personal, right? You can still invite grandma tomorrow, even though I got on your case today about this or whatever. And you have to establish that relationship. And it doesn't mean that your employee is your best friend, because they probably won't ever look at you as a best friend. But if they ever do quit, I have tons of guys that come back, even guys that I've fired, come back and say, man, that was the best job I ever had, And even though they didn't look at me like their best friend while they were here, Yeah.
Yeah. One of the things with employees is every once in a while they leave because they want to try and do their own thing. And you've mentioned to me, as far as some guys, if it's with your company or other gate companies, they want to go open up shop, and they make the mistake that a lot of us make, that I made, that I'm going to go be cheaper than everyone else because it makes sense, not realizing that there's a business behind it. So how do you guys see the competition with other gate companies, and where do you guys position yourself pricing wise, and what do you see other guys do in the market?
Well, I sat in a contractor's class, back in the 90s or whatever it was. It was back about then or whatever. And the guy said, and there was probably 40 of us in the room. And a guy said, and he owns several businesses and he ran this class. It was just one of the things that he did for the Register of Contractors. It wasn't his job, but he just ran classes on the side. And he said, I think he said half. I think he said half or maybe even 70%. I can't remember. But he said, half of you guys are going to be out of business in the next 3 years. And everybody's like, he's like, yeah, half of you are going to go back and work for somebody else, And everybody's like, how does he know that? And why would he say that? And he said, because you are going to think that the ticket to your business is to be cheaper than everybody else. And you are going to lose money on practically every job, and you're going to be able to do that for long enough to just barely survive maybe 3 years, and then you're going to be so broke that you have to. And he says, and you're going to cut corners, you're going to do different things because you're losing money on all these jobs. So I took that to heart immediately, and I was like, I'm not going to do that. So you have to be reasonable with your pricing, but in my view, what you really need to do is you need to price yourself where, look, the customer and yourself are not served well if you go out of business, right? If you're doing a job for them, they need you in business because you've got warranty, you've got things you need to take care of. If you're out of business 6 months later, that doesn't do them any good, it doesn't do me any good, right? So what you need to do is price yourself where you can make a profit, where you know this is a sustainable thing, and offer better service. Like that's how, and there's not going to be, there's going to be a whole host of customers out there, opportunities out there that are not going to want that. They want the super cheap price, but everybody they hire is going to go out of business. Everybody they hire is going to offer a crappy service. Everybody they hire, they're looking for that guy to lose money. Like that's the only thing they're happy with. They're only happy when they know you lost money on their job. That's the kind of value they want. And you don't want that customer. Don't shoot for that customer.
Yep.
So that's what you have to understand. You have to understand you got to shoot for the right customers, and those customers want better service. They want superior customer service. They want superior product. And then you can charge a price that is fair but elevated so that you can stay in business, and that serves them and yourself well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I had it this year where we had a customer or a couple customers that were not the easiest to deal with, and you had some advice for me with that in terms of the different people you run into. So how do you look at the different groups of customers, and how do you handle different groups of customers from all right, this is going to be a rough one that we're going to deal with, and then you've got the other side of the spectrum where we're never going to lose that customer for life?
Yeah. So it's funny you should say this, because for the first time in my entire business career, I had a guy I had a customer punch a piece of equipment and get in my face yesterday. And he was just unhinged off it, and it was really about a misunderstanding between what the old person who signed the estimate told me to do, and so they had asked me to come out to the property because they said, we think we asked you to do something different, and when I got out there, that wasn't the case. Actually, they had somebody managing their property, and they had told me to do one thing, so that's what I did. And then when the new manager came in, they said they thought it was something else. So it was just a misunderstanding, and that's what I was there to kind of iron out, right? That's why I go to these things. If there's a misunderstanding, I want to go out, right? And they asked me to come out. I said, sure, I'd love to come out. We'll figure it out. And this guy just lost it. So there's those difficult people, and some customers are not worth doing business for. Like this customer, I may have to, for the safety of my guys, I may have to just tell them they're going to have to find somebody else. We're going to square away what they want us to square away, but after that, I don't think I'm going to be able to send my guys to that property safely anymore, because that guy is seriously unhinged. Having said that, there are those customers that are difficult, but they're worth keeping, right? And sometimes there's a business niche there, right? So you have some customers that they're not mean, they're not terrible, they're just hard to deal with. Like, they're not people persons. They don't say things right. You know, you got to have a lot of understanding with them, but you make money on them, right? You make money on them. So there's a niche there. You're like, well, nobody else wants to put up with this person, so they'll put up with me. I got a monopoly with these people. As long as I put up with their stuff, So there's those guys, and those are worth keeping. And then there's the ones that are understanding, that are great to work with, stuff like that. So there's kind of a tiered thing there that goes on. But sometimes you just, like this last customer, like sometimes you just need to do the work, get out as fast as you possibly can, make sure your work is clean, and cut that deal, and say, we're not going back over there, So, you have to, in my view, my time in the golf business where I did customer service was the time that I thought most valuable. And the reason why I thought it was most valuable is because it's the part that deals with people. And yeah, you have to do good work. You have to give them a clean product. But the customer relations is really a huge part, and you have to be able to manage those personalities.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the things you said to me, and it was the right timing because I needed it a month later, was every once in a while you're going to run into someone who was unhappy before you met them. They're going to be unhappy while you're working for them. And no matter what you do, they will be unhappy
100%.
after you leave.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, and those are the ones that you just need to make sure that everything that you do is well done. It's done nice and clean, the work is done, and then you just got to get out. Because sometimes you can sit there and offer them everything under the sun, and they're just not going to be happy, So you offer them what's fair, and maybe you go a step above that so that they know you went over and above, and then you get out, because they're just not going to be happy people ever,
Yeah.
And that's just, and when you run into somebody like that, it's not just you they're like that with. They're like that with every single contractor. Like, it's really about the personality of these people, and some of these people just don't have a concept of business, right? They think that, let's just take a service call. They think they can send you out to the property. You can troubleshoot all of their problems for a couple hours, and then they tell you they don't want you to fix the problems, they just want to bid for the problems. But the problem is you just spent 2 hours troubleshooting and you figured it out. So what they want is they're wanting a free bid that they can take and then shop that bid to all these other companies, and they want to not pay you for that time. And they say, well, you didn't do anything. And you say, well, I drove an hour and 15 minutes across the valley. I spent 2 hours troubleshooting your system. I determined what all the problems are, and now you have a complete, laid out in front of you, you have a complete resolution in front of you on how it's going to be, and then you don't choose me, you shop that to another. So you have to understand, and these people, a lot of times, they really don't think about the fact how much money you just spent. They don't think about that. We do free bids, but we don't do free troubleshooting. We'll do a free bid where we go out and we look at something and we say, oh yeah, you need A, B, and C over here. I can see you got some rusted fencing, or your gates were hit by a car, they're all mangled up. But if there's some kind of internal problem with gate operators and we have to dig in and start doing troubleshooting, that's not free. That's a job in and of itself.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't understand that. And some people do understand it. They're just looking to get freebies. So you got to kind of, and obviously if you have a good customer, yeah, you can throw good customers a bone all the time. I do it all the time. Oh, for you? Yeah.
Yeah.
You've been a customer of mine 15 years. You better believe it. I'll take care of you.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Then on estimates, what's your process with sending that over, or do you have anything that's different in the way that you guys put together estimates than maybe the industry does?
Yeah, I mean, we really try to keep estimates simple, and I try to talk to my customers in an estimate. Most estimates are, and I'm not saying it's wrong to do it this way, but it's the other way. It's that it's not my personality, right? So most estimates you look at, it's a line with a number and then a period of time that you are thinking it's going to take for the install for your employees, and you've got all these things listed out. This,
4
and the
lights,
tax,
2 gates.
yeah,
plus.
and then and then man hours, and then and then consumables, and then you got taxes or whatever. I do my estimates as I generally started off with a little paragraph, and it says, "Hey, John, I see that you got A, B, and C out there. You would inform me that such and such. We went out there, took a look at that or whatever. Here's my thoughts on it. And my thoughts are A, B, and C, and da-da-da." And so then I've had big estimates accepted in the past where they said, "You know why they chose your estimate?" And I said, "Why?" And they said, "Because they believe that you understand the problem out here. They believe that and they liked how you explained everything to them." So my estimates aren't listed. So I'll list everything that I'm going to do, but it won't necessarily be broke down in those other parts, So my estimates are really, I'm kind of talking to my customer, and I simplify the estimates, and they like it. They like it, I mean, I get once in a blue moon, I'll get a customer who says, "Hey, can I have this?" And it's mostly because they're just used to having it the other way. And I say, "Sure." And then, and I can do that if they ask, but it's rare that I ever get asked. I get asked maybe a few times a year, and we do tens of thousands of estimates. I mean, I would imagine it's over 10,000 estimates a year. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
I think it's helpful too that we can get stuck in trade lingo, or especially with the guys that we're with, it's everyone knows this term or everyone knows what this is, and it's when you get to break it down a little bit more for the customer so that they feel like, okay, I see what's happening. The other thing you told me was that it makes it where it's not just, okay, I'm going to go put this in your house. It's like to do even just the plumbing on a shower valve, it's like I've got to do the valve, and then we do the shower, we come back, and then we do the trim at the end.
Yeah.
So it's being able to explain to, essentially your estimate can explain the story.
You do. You need to explain the story. If you explain the story, you can justify what you're charging. If you write, install new shower valve, right? So like say for instance, you got to put some concrete somewhere or whatever, because you got to install something on a concrete pad or whatever. You let them know, come out the first day, you're excavating, excavate soil, do this, form or whatever. Following day, pour concrete, allow dry 48 hours, return to property, right? And all this other stuff. So they understand, and they get, not only does it help them understand and justify the costs for your benefit, it helps them understand and justify the costs for possibly, depending on whether you're a subcontractor or depending on what you're doing, possibly it helps them justify it to their customer, or possibly to their wife or to their husband or whatever it is, or to themselves. Okay, I can justify this now. I understand it's going to take this guy 5 days, whatever, by the time he's done, or whatever. So, and it gives them a timeline of, and you can write in there, you can say, look, we might be able to install that 1 day early or whatever, but you need to give us a week, whatever, and you just, you explain these things to them, and I think it's helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
And then, as we've spent time together, what do you anticipate being some of the challenges I'm going to encounter going into either this next year, or what this next stage looks like, and where are the landmines?
Well, I think for you, the fact that you're doing as well as you're doing with, housing being as bad as it's been recently and stuff, I think that it's going to help you when I believe rates are going to get cut next year. And I think that, and more people are they're going to refinance, they're going to take money out. And I really think that things are just are going to be really, really good for you next year, in my view. I think things are going to be good for us next year. And we had a good year this year. And we really haven't had, we've had good years the last 4 or 5 years, but every year we've made more money, but inflation ate all that money up plus some. So even though my employees made more money, the company made more money gross and all that stuff. Me and my wife took a pay cut on several years, whatever. It's nothing crazy. I mean, those are the kinds of things you got to be, but and because the worst thing that can happen with a company is inflation, in my view. Like that's out of your control, right? The worst thing that can happen that's out of your control, in my view, is inflation. So I'm really looking forward to this coming year, because this year was better because inflation was pretty much not much, this year. So we had a good year. Bonuses were good this year. Next year, I think it's going to be greatly better than this year. I'm looking for a good year next year. So I think that's going to be multiplied for you in the industry that you're in. I think it's going to be really good for you.
Well, so as you look at if we'll take it both sides, if the market's going to be growing in general, and then love to hear kind of your thoughts on when the market does dip down again, how do you approach, hey, we need to ride the wave and catch as much as we can in this process, and then when it does turn, how do you guys make sure that we didn't just ramp up to drop right down, and make sure you can
So this is kind of, and it's really something that every business owner has to know and deal with ahead of time. And that is, in my view, very much a rule of thumb, simplify things. How do you get through a bad economy? Low debt. Low to no debt. That's how you get through a bad economy. All the guys that fold under a bad economy are generally the guys that have too much debt, because you know that your profit margin's going to go down. So you need to be able to ride that, right? And so we can ride that in our personal lives in general, right? If you get just enough to pay the food and you pay the house payment, then hey, we'll ride it, We'll ride out the bad times, we'll get through on the other side. But if you have too much debt and you can't ride that's where it gets you. And so that's why I never got into the debt thing. Everything, back when I couldn't afford new trucks, I bought crappy trucks, right? And I just replaced them, I was like, give me another $2,500 truck, and then I'd ride it until the wheels fell off, and then I'd give me another one, whatever. And that's how I do it. And it was just cheaper to do it that way, I mean, we would buy our tools at Harbor Freight instead of Lowe's, or online or Northern Tools or whatever. We would just buy Harbor Freight. So that, you just do different things like that to make sure. Most of the time, you can get through a bad economy. Yeah, your profit margin's going to go down. You guys might be eating a little top ramen here and there, but you're going to make it through. And a lot of my competitors didn't make it through the last two times we had that happen. They didn't make it. And, some of them have restarted their business under a different name, but, it never recovered. Like, they haven't recovered, their market share is real small now. So you just don't want to let that happen to you, and the way to do that is to keep your debt to a minimum. Additionally, as far as employees go, you sometimes have to lay people off. Out of all the years that I've been in business, almost 3 decades now, I have not had to lay anybody off. But what I've done is, when the bad economy hits, you'll see guys start moving around, right? Guys, I'm going back to Oklahoma, or I'm going here or whatever. And I just don't, and it's been good for me. I'm not saying that would happen all the time. I still reserve the right to lay somebody off. But what I did is as they left, I did not rehire. As they left, I did not rehire. As they left, I did not rehire. And then when things picked back up, then, after I knew we were, a year into some good work again and things were turning around, I'd start to rehire guys. Yeah.
So when it transitions from that lower economy, some of the guys are stepping out. It's is that even in a lower economy, do you try and step in and start picking up market share, even if it's not, even if it's more on the service side, not necessarily
100%.
new installs? Or
in the low economies, 100%. Yeah. You really need to push at that point. Like, at that point, what I try to do in a bad economy is I try to get as much market share as I can possibly get, because there's an opportunity there, right?
Even if that's not
That's right.
large paying customers.
Even if it's not. Because what you're looking to do at that point is, number one, keep your employees busy so that you don't have to lay guys off. Because remember, if you lay guys off, you're paying unemployment now for a year, right? So if you can be a net zero on a job, just keeping the guys busy, you're doing yourself a favor, right? So, and I'm not saying you have to do a net zero, but generally, let's say you just do a 5% profit on something or whatever. Well, at least you're making 5%, right? And the guys, you don't have to lay anybody off. So, and here's a big ticket though. You're getting through the bad economy, but in addition to that, you're grabbing market share. And then when the economy turns around, you've got a boom. You're really going to boom. And why is that? Because now you have 7% more market share than you did before, because these other guys went under, these other guys, whatever. And a lot of times that's what companies will do. A lot of times is they'll reel back and they'll be like, whoa, we got to, whatever. And then they'll lay off a bunch of guys, and then they'll have one employee or two, whatever. And they don't have enough people to go get the market share. So if you can, and that's why I didn't lay anybody off in the past, is I tried to grab as much market share as I possibly could while the economy was bad, because I knew I would rebound 10 times faster than anybody else afterwards. So it's kind of what you got to do, and it kind of sucks because you feel like you're spinning your wheels and you're not making much money. You're like, yeah, man, I'm busier than ever. Like I got 5 million things going on, and I'm barely making any money, and we're eating top ramen. But you're setting it for the future. Like that's what you're doing. So, and you do have to make some money. I'm not saying you lose money on jobs. You can't do that in a bad economy. You can't lose money on jobs. Yeah, but yeah, that's what you really need to do. Yeah.
Then when things pick back up, it's typically not a light switch, but when you start to see it turn, are there anything that you're going to do with hiring or with the type of services you guys are providing during that time to try and account for maybe higher margin projects that are coming in?
Well, yeah. So in the past, what I've done, and I think that it depends on where you're at in your business, right? So in the past, what I've done is, like sometimes, like you said, it's a slow return, right? But sometimes it's like 2016, right? And I'm not saying that we were in the worst economy in 2014, 15, whatever, but it was just kind of stagnant, right? We were growing, but it wasn't at some crazy rate. It was just this constant, slow climb up or whatever, which is most years. And then in 2016, we like doubled our business, or 2017, we doubled our business, So there's years like that happen like that. That year, it was hard to even keep up. I'm like buying trucks, and they get really expensive when that happens, because everybody's trying to buy trucks. There's no trucks. Yeah. But having said that, if you have too much work, you can't get the employees, then you got to raise your prices. And then you start being selective about what you do. You're going to get less bids, but the bids are going to be more profitable, and because you don't really have any choice. If you can hire enough employees, then there's, the better option would be to grow larger, keep your prices lower, which is where I'm at right now. You grow larger, keep your prices lower, and you just make more money out of just mass gross of work. And so if you can do that, but sometimes the job, the employee pool out there is small during those times of fast growth, it's hard to get guys. And so you've only got guys that are incompetent or have criminal records or whatever available, all the good guys are like gone, so you just got to try to manage that, whatever. Right now I have a good crew. And I have a big crew, and we're adding another guy right now too. So, because we're just busy. And so we can do a lot of work. We can do a lot of work in a day. We can do truckloads of jobs. Sometimes we can do 50 jobs in a day or more. So having said that, I'm able to keep my prices lower just out of sheer quantity of jobs, So I like doing that, and that's a great problem to have or whatever. But I wasn't always in that position, so yeah.
No. Kind of specifically to your industry, what have you guys seen changing with gate systems? Talking to Greg, he's given me a little bit of the background on how some of the electronics are changing and some of the things that you guys are adding on to it. But what are you guys seeing changing with more of the electronic systems?
Yeah, technology. I mean, the technology, it's just simple as that. Technology today, and it's changing so fast that, we're recommending different products today than we were 3 years ago, So, and there's still some of our industry that's lagging behind on certain type of products, that I wish they would get up to date with, But having said that, yeah, the technology is changing so fast. And if you don't keep up with that, and some of my old competitors are not keeping up with that, which is an advantage to me, But you have to be able to keep up with that technology. But in the gate business, that's what it is. It's
Can we
technology.
talk specifically what in the technology is changing?
Well, now everything is cloud-based. Everything is we can bring laptops out to the property. We can pull all kinds of information out of our equipment that normally you would just go out there and it was just guesswork. And we still have a lot of guesswork, in a sense, and we're really good at that type of troubleshooting because that's what we've been used to for decades. But because there's still a lot of old equipment out in the field, there still will be for 20 more years. But yeah, being able to access a lot more information on the equipment in the field is a great benefit. Increases our time on the job. There's less time in fixing in making a repair and a service call than there was 5 years ago, because we're able to access more information, process that quicker, and then be able to make the repair. And less return trips. There was many times you would get problems in the past that when you got out there, everything's working fine. There's no indication as to what was, because in automatic gate systems, most of your problems are intermittent. So you're just hoping to catch it, right?
Yeah.
There's 50 things it could be, you don't know. And sometimes you're really good at guessing those things, but sometimes you can only narrow it down to 6. Right? You're like, it could be one of these 6 things. Legitimately could be one of, you can't just replace 6 things. I mean, it'd be $3,500,
Yep.
So that stuff has been really nice. The technology's been really nice. And we here at our company, we love the technology. We embrace it and we try to stay up with it. We're always on top of it.
Yeah. How do you guys train the crews to stay up to date with everything as new stuff keeps rolling out?
Well, I mean, basically, you just have to train them right, and we...
Do you have, dedicated days that you say, hey, we need to have a couple of the guys come and we need to train you on this system, or...
It's a little bit more progressive than that, in the sense that it doesn't happen at one time. So what happens is this stuff starts getting slowly infused into the market, and the guys start picking it up as it comes, right? So if we have a new employee, now that's a different thing. Yeah, then there's a whole training thing that's got to go on. But for the guys that have been here, they're good enough where they say, hey, we picked up that property and they have that new system out here or whatever, and so I installed a control board today or whatever, and this is what's going on with that new control board, so I had to download these things and then I had to do this or whatever. And then he tells the other guys, and then the other guys get an opportunity, and so it just slow. And then a year later, you see another one of those, or 2 or 3, and then we pick up 5 of them. By the time we pick up several, everybody knows how to do it already, So, and there's always talk about whenever we see something new or whatever. There's always discussion about it, And so the guys are good enough where they pick this stuff up without like a formal training session.
Yeah. Then for when you have new guys come in, do you guys have standard operating procedures that are more written down, or is it more of kind of like hey, we hand it down guy to guy and kind of more the typical way with the trades? How do you approach all that?
It's a little bit of both. I mean, I guess it's a little bit of standard operating procedure. There are things that I definitely go over with them, and I say, this is what the deal is. This is what the deal is. This is what the deal is. They all sign a non-compete with me. You know, they can't come in, step on my toes, steal my customers. I don't, you know, some guy wants, and I've had many guys who are welders here, and then they go off and they do their own welding business here in the Valley or what. That's fine. I never see those guys. I never hear about them or whatever. I'm happy to help them if they call me for, you know, whatever. I'm happy to say, give them advice. But if I hear they're going after my customer, you know, specifically trying to take my customer or whatever, that's when we make them sign non-compete. So that's one thing that we do. But as far as procedure goes out in the field, yes, there are very specific things that I go over. After that, it's more handed down guy to guy because they train with another guy for a long time. And I don't just stick them with one of my guys, I stick them with a bunch of my different guys or whatever. So then they're like, yeah, don't do this, you know, Kevin will call you and he will, you know, he'll lose his lunch over it. So don't do this, you know. So there's a lot of that goes on, you know, whatever. So, but yeah, a little bit of both.
Yeah, awesome. If, as you look forward for the company, if you wanted to double in size in the next couple of years, what would you envision headcount looking like, roles looking like, and just overall structure of your job inside of that?
Yeah, I don't think I can double in size over the next couple of years just for my industry. I don't think I could do it responsibly.
If we were to even say remove the next couple of years, if we were to say just double period.
Yeah, so my company would look like, right now we have 20 employees. So my company would look like 40 to 50 employees. Do I think we're gonna get there? Yeah. Do I think that 40 to 50 employees is a ways off? Yeah, because it's more of a slow deal for us or whatever. And really, it's a snowballing effect about the company's reputation is really how we grow, right? People are like, yeah, you've been through 6 companies, you know, you just need to go to Signature, just use them, and that's it. Like, and if you got a problem, call Kevin. I mean, and you know, and then finally you get customers that settle in with that. They say, yeah, I've been jumping around. Signature might be a little higher on this one, but he's a little lower on this price or whatever. All kind of comes out in the wash or whatever. Maybe I pay a little bit more, maybe I don't, maybe it's about the same as you know, and we're definitely not the most expensive in the Valley, to say the least. I've seen a lot of my competitors' bids, and some of these guys are way higher than me. But bottom line is, they come here, they stay here, they get good service, and then they lose all the desire to go price shopping, you know, because we just make it easy for them. Having said that, you know, there would need to be, sorry, that's my alarm. It's just telling me to take the trash out, so. But my neighbor calls me every day and tells me, hey, you gotta take the trash out. That's gonna go off in a second again because I accidentally hit the wrong button. But, so it's gonna require more people to, like, I've got a guy right now that kind of runs around and watches after the guys and checks work here and there or whatever. That's going to need to increase. I'm going to maybe need a full-time guy to do that, right? And then I might need another guy to run another type of management system. Right now I have a couple of guys that do bids, and one of them almost only does bids, right? And so those things would have to increase. So what happens when I move to that next level is I'm going to lose 2 or 3 positions to guys that are not actually going to create any revenue every day. They're just going to ensure I don't lose the revenue I've got. So, you know, those are always steps that cost money, you know. So when you double in size, it's not as big of a cash payday as you think, you know, and it seems like there's certain times you can double in size and it's a big cash payday. Once you get to a certain point though, and you can't get to this point where you lose contact with the quality of what you guys are doing and the knowledge of what you're doing. And so that's the difficult part. I mean, we will get to 50 employees, there's no doubt, because we grow every year, but it'll be a little while. But I'm thinking next year is going to be a growth of probably 2 to 3 employees, I'm betting, next year.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
Because this year it was 1, right? Actually, it's 2 this year. We did 2 more employees. I have 2 more employees this year.
Nice. Cool. And then you guys work primarily for communities. So how is the process for you guys with acquiring customers more on a business to business front rather than straight business to homeowner? Like,
yeah, now it just snowballs by itself. But in the past, it's been more about personal communications with individual customers, and like I said, that's my niche. My niche is being a people person. Like I like people. I like talking to people. I enjoy conversations with different people. Like, you could be a bookworm with the big thick glasses. I can relate to that guy, right? You can be a single lady with 3 kids at home, chain smoker, working her rear end off and has some foul language once in a while. Hey, that's no problem. I can relate with that lady, right? Or whatever. So I just try to make a connection with a person where they're at, right? And I like doing that. I like that. And I think the reason why I like doing that is because I'm a Christian. So I like to connect with people, and I like to talk with people, and I don't care where they're from, what they do, what whatever. Hey, let's talk, So that's really been the ticket, and that's why I always say that the golf business, the service business, was the most valuable to me, because it kind of honed those things that I like to do. Like, I have that in my heart. So it then honed that to where I became very good at doing that, because I like doing that. But having said that, I have to do that today. Basically on a level of when I already have the customer. I don't do it today on a level of trying to get the customer most of the time. Now, I do talk to customers that are just coming on board. I like to make the phone call to them, but they already came on board, right? So they heard from somebody else that we were good or whatever, and then I just hear about it because they say, hey, we got a new customer today, whatever. I say, hey, give me the phone number, I'll give them a call. So fortunately, all the work that we put in the past just is kind of now on auto.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, well, phones are ringing, so we've got a couple questions real quick to wrap it all up. What's the most impactful thing you've learned?
The most impactful thing I've learned is I believe that a lot of people work hard, right? And I understand I'm not the only guy out there who works hard. But for me, if I'm being 100% honest, it just depends on whether the Lord wants to bless the work of your hands or not. So for me, that's the one thing I've learned. For whatever reason, the Lord has blessed the work of my hands, right? So He's given me the things to think, given me the ability to act the way that I need to act. He's done these things or whatever, because I see a lot of guys do work hard and they spin their wheels a lot of times. So now, not that hard work doesn't pay off. I think that's just a truth of life. Hard work does pay off. For anybody, hard work pays off. But it doesn't necessarily guarantee that it's going to pay off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's your favorite movie?
Favorite movie's got to be Good, the Bad, and the Ugly.
Your first character strength that comes to mind?
People.
And then best old school muscle car?
1970 Chevelle. There's 2 of them right there. SS.
If people wanted to get in contact with you guys, what's the best place for them to do that?
You can go to our website or give us a call. We're at 602-695-3484 is the main office number, or you can go to signaturegatesystems.com.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, thanks so much. I appreciate it.
I appreciate it.
And then thank you guys for watching, listening, and until next time, I hope your hammer stays accurate, your Wi-Fi fast, and your work blessed. See you, everybody.